If you can trust yourself, I can trust that you will answer in the best way possible that aligns with who you are. And then from there, we can work together.
Hello, and welcome to the Regenerative Edge. This is a podcast focused on creating a listening space for founders, directors, and changemakers who are tired of pretending that growing a business and healing the world have to be two separate things. This is not your typical business podcast. In this episode, Moh Al-Haifi is joined by Tania and Renee Mitchell from Tandem to explore how culture is felt, shaped, and lived, and what it means to build organizations rooted in trust, relationships, and shared responsibilities. Enjoy.
How we breathe and how we operate and what do we do without thinking, in my mind, is a technology. It acts before we ask it to act. And I think that's why it's ultimately extremely important to spend time understanding the culture that we're building, the culture that we're in, the culture that we belong to. Other things that come up for me was, I think here at Tandem, we talk a lot about how we work at the speed of trust. And that was something introduced to me by my friend Tira. She runs Esqueo Air, Woman Air, one of our clients. And she talks about how working at the speed of trust allows us to move fast. But in order to move fast, we have to be able to have trust. And how we have interpreted that here at Tandem is actually building a culture of learning how to trust yourself. If we don't know how to trust ourselves, then it's really difficult for people around to trust you. If you can trust yourself, I can trust that you will answer in the best way possible that aligns with who you are. And then from there, we can work together and I find where we can move together. That's kind of how we got to really bring in the idea of, I have a dream that we get to fly together. We get to flock together. We actually get to move without words, because we can sense that the person guiding us, leading us in the group is guiding and leading us in the way that we've all pre-decided that that's where we want to go, or it's keeping us safe, or it's taking care of us, or it's giving us fun. One of the above. Maybe not necessarily just one. Maybe it's all. Those are just some topics that come up when we talk about it, and where do we feel uneasiness in culture? Where do we find dis-ease? Is dis-ease disease in our culture?
There's something subtle sitting underneath this idea of culture. Trust, not just between people, but within ourselves. It shapes how we move, how we trust, how we come together. Now we move from the broader idea of culture into the lived realities of it, the micro, where changes become possible.
Renee, from everything that was said so far, I'd love to hear from you. Yeah, what's coming up in you when you're defining what culture and people is for a organization that maybe wants to become more regenerative?
I think about it often as the dance between the macro and the micro. So often we get caught in the macro of how can we create change and look at it from a big picture. But I always come back to the kitchen table. So I think about the relationship that you have with the people at your kitchen table, your family, your friends, the people that you convene. If that's not healthy and thriving, and if you can't have good relations with one another, that is the seed to good relations overall. So taking that to a business context, to a company context, it is the space to be able to foster those good relations, with your employees, with your stakeholders, with your clients. I think that being in right relationship with one another, and that goes into granular things like how do we treat one another, like pay equity, like fair pricing, transparency, thoughtful supply chain. So yeah, I just go through that. Like, how do we solve the big picture? It goes right down to like the little everyday actions.
I love that. Micro and macro, I think, is a really lovely also way to just separate and guide maybe some of the conversation. So what I'm hearing is there almost feels like there's more leaning towards the micro to enable you to kind of have the courage and ability and capacity to even address the macro. Can you maybe touch a bit more on that, either one of you?
Yeah, I mean, I think the micro is often where we have influence. It's where we can lead and really like live our leadership. So like leading by I always think of like servant leadership, and that leading through doing, embodying, the embodiment versus the talking of leadership. And I think if your circle is macro, if your influence as a leader is macro, by all means, like influence the masses. But for many of us, our influence is through our networks that we've cultivated, our communities. So I think that's maybe the most effective way for change is through your current sphere of influence. And I go back to, very old school business resources like the 360-degree leader, which I think might also be a Stephen Covey book, if I remember correctly. But basically the principle was like, no matter where you are in an organization, you can lead. So I bring that in because I don't think change and leadership and culture building is just for the leaders to do. I think it's like a co-created with everyone in the organization. Like we all pour in to create that shared culture together. Leaders have a lot of influence, but it's the beauty is when you kind of give space for the co-creation to emerge.
And co-creation in what sense, Renee? Is that co-creation with the team or?
Yeah, I think team, clients, like all stakeholders, it's like engaging people in conversation, in relationship with one another, and giving that spaciousness to hear, like, what do you have to say? What do you see? What are your needs? I think if that top down sort of like I know best approach of leadership, I think that has led us all sorts of places that maybe we're trying to find our way out of. So it's leadership from bringing the voices out and maybe like nurturing the conversations, creating the space for that as a place to create that culture.
Oh, I want to go into that more, but let's save that for the actual episode.
so much.
All right. Well, thank you so much to both of you. It was really enjoyable. I'm more energized than before, for sure.
Thank you for listening to the Regenerative Edge. Today's conversation invites us to consider trust, not just between people, but within ourselves. In our next episode, we continue this thread with Renee, exploring the role of the self and what it means to show up more fully in the spaces we shape. To continue the discussion yourself, you can visit the website in our description. The Regenerative Edge is stewarded by Zebra Growth, an agency working to shift the marketing landscape for intention and practice towards a regenerative approach that nurtures resilience, cultivates connection, and redefines what success can mean. This podcast is also nourished by the talent and insight of our foundational partners, Unity Effect and Tandem, who you'll meet throughout Season 1. Walk to the edge with us. The bridge is wide enough for all.